Good morning, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of Scott's Selections here with StatSalt.com. It is currently Saturday, August 24th, which means that college football is finally upon us. However, there are only two games going on tonight, so based on that, you can still get in some college football win totals and some futures, and based on that, I feel like it's a perfect opportunity to dive into the futures in college football, and I will be giving you some of my personal favorites and the lines that I like and the reasons why. So with that being said, I'm going to be giving you three futures in terms of win totals and over-unders, and I will give you the lines and why I feel so strongly about these three plays. And without further ado, we're going to dive right in. The first play that I do like is going to be on Rice, and I like them under 2.5, which is available at minus 210 on 5 dimes. I'm aware that sounds like a lot of juice, and I tell you right now, that is by far the one with the most juice on it. However, I feel really strongly about this play, and it is my favorite play, and it has been bet up in the last couple of weeks. It was originally at minus 190 at 5 dimes about a week and a half ago, currently up to minus 210, and I'm going to dive into the reasons why I like the under. First of all, they only won 2 games last year, and they had an FCS opponent in Abilene Christian in week 1, who they only beat by 3 points. So this team is returning a decent amount of starters from last year's team. However, they won 1 game against FBS opponents last year, and it came in the regular season finale against Old Dominion. So they don't really have much talent to begin with, as they will be the weakest member of their conference in the CUSA. Now, one thing I look for, just a general tip, if you're going to be betting an over or an under, make sure you factor in the start of the schedule more heavily than anything else, because everything is possibly going to change in terms of injuries and stuff later in the year. The one thing that you can account for at best case scenario is looking at the start of a season for a respective program and to try to predict how they're going to start out their year. Of course, naturally, you will see some injuries along the way, but you get to limit some of that injury risk if you see a team and you know that the start of their schedule is going to be relatively easy or relatively hard. The start of Rice's season is borderline impossible, and if you are taking an under 2.5, you are of course going to look for a lot of tough matchups earlier in non-conference play. To start the season for Rice, they start out at Army, as they are 23-point underdogs. Then they play at home against Wake Forest, who made a bowl game last year. And they play at home against Texas, at home against Baylor, at home against Louisiana Tech, and at UAB, which means that the first 6 games on Rice's schedule are against teams that made bowl games last year. I think Rice will end up 0-6 to start the season, and I think that will set the chains in motion for a very abysmal season for Rice. I've looked up the projections for Rice on several sites, including some win probability charts, and everything that I've seen has Rice winning roughly 1 or 2 games tops, as according to this projection factor that I found online, and I analyzed it, and I looked through the projected point margins as well as the win probability, Rice is only projected to win 1 game this year, and that is going to be against UTEP in the regular season finale, and they have a win probability of 64%. However, other than that, they have a 48% chance of beating UTSA in the middle of the season on October 19th. Other than that, their win probability in every other game they have is below 24%, which means that Rice, on a best case scenario in terms of win probability, is expected to win roughly 2 games. They're at 48% against UTSA, who's supposed to be one of the worst teams in the conference. However, UTSA will be at home in that game, so I expect UTSA to definitely show up for that one. Basically, the main thing that I noticed about Rice is that all of their quote-unquote winnable games are all on the road. If you've looked at their schedule, which I'm looking at now, you see that they play at UTEP in the regular season finale, which they are supposed to win according to win probability about 64% of the time. They're also supposed to play Middle Tennessee State later in the year, who has some uncertainties with regard to a new quarterback, and their projected win probability is 22%. And then they also have UTSA on October 19th, and their win probability is 48%. All 3 of those games, which they have a hypothetical chance at winning, are all on the road. Middle Tennessee, they do have an extra week to prepare for, but Middle Tennessee is going to be at home for that game, and they did make a bowl game last year. I definitely think they will show up for that one. and I think that they will be in the thick of bowl contention once again in the CUSA, so I expect them to definitely try to take care of business at home. UTEP, I know that they're the worst team, however, it is the regular season finale, will be senior day there, and it also will be in UTEP, so that's no gimme necessarily for a Rice team that won 2 games last year. And you also have UTSA, which will be at UTSA. UTSA, even though they were bad last year, were able to blow out Rice and win last season. So overall, other than that, with Rice, in addition to the pretty awful schedule, they have an undersized defensive line, and they gave up 400 plus yards of offense every game last year. I definitely think that this Rice defense will continue to struggle. They also have an unproven quarterback in Wiley Green. They lost their top 2 running backs. I know that they like to run a Stanford type of pro-style offense. They like to control the clock, and they like to run the ball. But their offensive line should be slightly improved with a couple of graduate transfers, but I don't trust their quarterback. I don't trust their defense. I don't think they'll be able to stop teams whatsoever. I think if they're going to win, they will have to control the time of possession, and I definitely think Middle Tennessee should be able to handle that. UTEP, probably not so much. I think they probably will beat UTEP. But even if they beat UTSA, which is a borderline toss-up, and they're still projected to lose that game roughly 52% of the time, that gets you to about 2 wins. I think they'll lose every other game. The 3 toss-up games, hypothetically, are UTSA, Middle Tennessee, and UTEP, and they have to win all 3 of them in order to potentially cover this over. So I think the minus 210 is justified, and I will lean to the under 2.5, which is available at minus 210 at 5 dimes. And personally, I will be putting 2.1 units on that to win a unit, as I think that Rice will simply be terrible, and I think that that is borderline free money. Other than that, riskier pick to balance out the heavy chalk in the first selection. We are going to be taking the Texas Longhorns and a much more mainstream team on the over 9.5 wins, which is available at plus 180 on Bet Online, and those are regular season wins, not including bowl games and conference titles. So, last year they won 9 games in the regular season, lost to Oklahoma in the conference title game, then they ended up destroying Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. Sam Ehlinger, of course, is going to be the main attraction for that offense, as he is a 12-1 candidate to win the Heisman Trophy, and he became the first college quarterback ever to have over 25 passing touchdowns and over 15 or more rushing touchdowns and not win the Heisman. So he is coming back. He is looking to put Texas back on the map, so to speak, as they believe that they are up to big things in Texas with Tom Herman as the head coach, who in my opinion is a very elite head coach, and I think he's underrated. Offensive genius, whether it was at Houston or it was at Ohio State. He's pretty much succeeded on offense wherever he's gone. They have lost a couple of pieces on offense in terms of an offensive line, as well as a little Jordan Humphreys, who has gone on to the NFL. I still think they'll be fine, though. They do return some big weapons in terms of their offense, and even though they lost a couple of offensive line starters, the general consensus has been that their offensive line has actually improved, as some of the younger guys have absolutely dominated in the scrimmages and the spring game, and that definitely bodes well for a Texas team that will like to pound the rock, with Sam Ehlinger, who runs a somewhat Tebow style of play, where he can throw it, and he could also run the ball, and I definitely think that on short yardage conversions, or short yardage situations, Ehlinger is pretty much a bowling ball, and I think he will be able to run forward and prolong some drives. Other than that, though, they bring back their special teams unit. People always focus on offense and defense. They tend to forget about the special teams. They bring back their kicker and their punter from last year, with Dicker the kicker, who's officially back, as well as Buchevsky, who was a Ray Guy finalist, and he is back. Definitely special teams, especially in a conference that plays pretty much no defense. Overall, in the Big 12, it is very important to get field position and to capitalize on your opportunities. Dicker's one of the best kickers in the country, and they also have one of the best punters in the country, and he was almost an award recipient for that. So I definitely like the special teams unit there. The main question mark for Texas will be on the defensive line, as they lost a lot of defensive starters. However, they do have a top 3 recruiting class full of young talent, and they will be looking to plug some of those holes early. Is that a little bit of a concern? Potentially. But to be honest, the fact that the Big 12 pretty much has a bunch of teams that play no defense at all, even Oklahoma, who won the conference and made it to the playoff last year, they had one of the worst defenses in the country. So if their defense is bad, am I really concerned? No. Is it a little bit of a concern? Potentially. They do have the talent to overcome that, but overall the Big 12 is just going to be mostly shootouts that I definitely think if Texas can resemble some form of defense, they're automatically going to be in the top 3 in the conference in defense behind probably Iowa State, who I do like a lot, but overall, I definitely think Texas should be able to figure out their defensive issues early on and win some big games there. Now, important to mention, as we mentioned with all of the win totals, you have to factor in scheduling, of course, and at 9.5 at plus 180, that means that they have to go 10-2. So you're looking at 2 losses maximum in order for you to cash this. In terms of their schedule, they start out the year at home against Louisiana Tech, which should be a win. Then after that, they play a huge marquee matchup against LSU. It is worth mentioning that that game will be in Texas. They will be the home team for that, as that will be one of the primetime games at night. I expect Texas to be absolutely rocking in that arena, and I definitely think that LSU, even though they have a lot of preseason hype, have had issues with their quarterback in the past. I don't trust Burrows. They still have some inconsistencies with regard to their rushing attack, as they ended up losing some key contributors from last season. Do I think that it's a guaranteed win for Texas? No. However, they are at home, and I think that definitely will bode well for them, as they tend to play very well with Herman as head coach in these marquee type of matchups. So Texas could easily get the win there. Other than that, they play Rice the week after, which they will roll over as Rice is terrible, as I just went through that. Oklahoma State at home. Oklahoma State is good, however, they do lose some key pieces from last year's team. They lose Justice Hill out of the backfield. They lose their starting quarterback. I definitely don't really trust this Oklahoma State team. Will they put up points? Of course they will under a Mike Gundy system. But at home, I definitely think Oklahoma State's defense will continue to struggle. I think Texas will run the ball down their throat, and I think they should be able to win the game at home. Then they go to Morgantown against West Virginia, which I know sounds like a trap game. However, West Virginia's over-under in wins is at 5.5 with heavy juice to the under, which means that they don't even expect West Virginia to make a bowl game, according to most books. Main reason, obviously, they play no defense. Will Greer, the star quarterback, is gone. I know Austin Kendall came over, and he is supposed to become the starter for this team, but nobody really knows much about him. He hasn't really proven much. And West Virginia, I know that it is in West Virginia, so they will be motivated. However, Texas does have a week off before this matchup, so they will have an extra week to prepare for this game. So based on that, Texas has a very reasonable shot of starting out the season 5-0 or 4-1 if they end up losing to LSU. Their following game is the coup de grace, which is going to be, of course, in the Cotton Bowl against Oklahoma, and that will be on Saturday, October 12th. It's in the Cotton Bowl, so it will be in Texas. Texas did win this game last year with Kyler Murray at the helm for Oklahoma. For me, I know that a lot of people love Oklahoma, and I understand that, but based on the fact that their defense is still terrible, they lost 80% of their starting offensive line, as every one of their offensive linemen who left ended up going to the pros. So, in other words, Oklahoma had the best quarterback in the nation, arguably the best offensive line in the nation. They've lost 40%. They've lost 4 or 5 starters from the offensive line, and I'm really not a big Jalen Hurts guy. I know that he accomplished some big things at Alabama. He's proven time and time again that besides being a runner, he's a pretty inaccurate passer. I know he came up huge for Alabama against Georgia last year in the regular season, but he also proved against Clemson in the title game the first time that he simply cannot throw the ball consistently on an inaccurate basis. So based on that, I definitely think Texas should be able to handle Oklahoma. Oklahoma's defense is a huge question mark. I think Oklahoma's offense will take some serious steps back without Murray and that elite offensive line, and the game is in Texas. So for that reason, I'll lean to Texas on that one. Then you play Kansas at home. You play at TCU, which is a little bit of a question mark. However, TCU still has serious quarterback concerns, and I simply just don't trust that unit. I know Gary Patterson has the talent, and I know that they will be definitely motivated for that game in itself. But as a whole, TCU, I don't really have high hopes for this season. Can Texas lose that game? Sure, because it is a rivalry. But at the same point, I definitely think they should be able to take care of business in that one. So I'll lean to Texas on that. Then I'll look at Kansas State at home. I think they'll win that one. Kansas State ended up taking North Dakota State's coach, so you have to wonder about some growing pains there. Plus, it is in Texas, and Kansas State has no quarterback to speak of whatsoever. They're going to look to run the clock. They're going to look to drain it. I simply think Texas is a much better overall team, and they're going to be at home. Lean to Texas on that one. Other than that, you have at Iowa State. I think they will lose that one, as I definitely think that Campbell, as the head coach, is the most underrated coach in the country. I think that Iowa State is an ultimate trap game, and I definitely think Iowa State should win that game. Do I think it's a lock? No. I think Texas still has a shot to win that game on the road, but I would not be surprised to see Texas lose that game outright. Other than that, you play at Baylor. I know Charlie Brewer's back for Baylor, but they still have no defense, and I think Texas should be looking to lock in on their regular season conference championship, which will lead to a berth in the conference title game. I think they'll get the job done there. And then you have them playing at home against Texas Tech. Kingsbury's gone. You have huge question marks in the defense every single year. I know their quarterbacks have some talent, but with a new system, I do not have high hopes for Texas Tech also. So based on that, I think they'll beat LSU at home. I think it'll be close. I think it'll be a very entertaining game. But at the same point, it's going to be in Texas at night. I think that they should come out focused, and I think they'll win that one. Oklahoma, they could lose, but that will also be in Texas at the Cotton Bowl. So based on that, I think that they probably will lose to Iowa State. I think if they win one of two games against Oklahoma or LSU, you definitely have a serious shot of cashing that ticket. Plus, at plus 180, you can honestly hedge the thing if they end up beating LSU. Because realistically, if they end up beating LSU and they end up going into the Oklahoma game undefeated, if they beat Oklahoma, I don't see how you don't cash this win ticket, as this win total, I should say, as after you've beaten LSU and Oklahoma, who are two preseason top 6 teams. I don't see how you end up losing 2 games in conference to the likes of Iowa State and TCU and Kansas State and people of that nature. So based on that, I definitely think there is too much value here at plus 180 to pass up. And I think that since the 2 marquee games for Texas will be at home, or in Texas, I should say, and they will have a massive home field advantage, I definitely think that plus 180 is warranted, and I will lean to that as my second win total on the future. And the third play will be in the ACC. We will be taking North Carolina under 5 wins at minus 125 at MyBookie. You have to shop around. It is available at 4.5 at some other spots at plus prices. I believe 5 Dimes had it at 4.5 at plus 115. It was available at Bet on the Line at plus 135, I believe. But I like the extra half win here. I definitely think that North Carolina has a shot of potentially winning 5 games, but I think there's a significantly higher chance of them going under than over. So based on that, I definitely think the minus 125 is warranted as you're looking at a worst-case scenario push. Simply put, start the season. They start out against South Carolina on a neutral. You have against Miami, Florida at home, at Wake Forest. You play Appalachian State off of a bye week for Appalachian State, not North Carolina. So Appalachian State will easily have this game circled on their calendar, as they will look to get a very nice out-of-conference win against the ACC. And then they play Clemson. So based on that, South Carolina, I think they'll lose, especially with Bentley back at quarterback. Miami, I know that Miami is a bit of a question mark, but their defense is always fantastic, and I think they should force mayhem against North Carolina. At Wake Forest, I think is an underrated team with 2 quarterbacks, whether it's Harmon or it's going to be Newman. I definitely think Wake Forest will have a high-octane offense, and I think North Carolina will struggle defensively. Appalachian State, I think that they could beat Appalachian State. However, the bye week there for Appalachian State leading up to the game makes me believe that Appalachian State's, with their extra time of preparation, should be able to take care of business, as they will be by far the favorites to win in their conference, and they have been an absolute powerhouse, and I think that they should be able to win this game due to Zach Thomas. They have Zach Thomas returning. They pretty much have most of their starters back from last season in terms of the offense. Defense, they will be missing some of their secondary, but I definitely like the coaching staff's ability to adapt, and I'm not really a big fan of North Carolina's quarterback play. And then you play Clemson. I don't really need to justify why I think Clemson's going to kill them. Other than that, though, their leading tackler from the last 3 seasons is gone, so you have huge question marks in the linebacking core. You also have a seriously inexperienced secondary, so you have to wonder how that defense will shape up. They've won a combined 5 games over the last 2 years, so telling me that they're going to suddenly match their win total from the last 2 seasons in 2019 seems a little bit optimistic to me. They also have serious issues with special teams, as you have a new kicker and a new punter, and that could lead to some serious issues late in games, as they could be leaving a lot of points off the board due to some missed field goals and some really bad field position. And they also have some uncertainty at quarterback, as they have 3 potential starters. The 2 who were supposed to give a serious run for last year's starting position ended up both getting injured, and they played a combined 5 games. They did get a transfer in, or they did get somebody from who was looking at the Florida State, but he ended up choosing to go to North Carolina. I know Mac Brown is a big name in terms of coaching, but his times with Vince Young in Texas were long ago, and I simply think that the ACC as a whole, they're not the greatest conference, but I definitely think they're good enough to force North Carolina under this 5 at win total. So I've already gone through the first 5 games. They could easily start out 0-5 or 1-4. They play at Georgia Tech, which is tough because it's at Georgia Tech. However, Georgia Tech is going to be terrible. They will be the worst team in the conference. I think North Carolina will win that game. So I think you're looking at 2-4 or 1-5 to start the year. They have a bye week, then they play at Virginia Tech. I think that's going to be a loss. Virginia Tech is honestly lethal at home. I know Willis has been a little bit inconsistent last season, but I still like Virginia Tech's overall team. Then they play Duke. However, Duke will be entering this game off of a bye week, so they will definitely have this game circled on their calendar in order for the in-state rivalry. And Cutcliffe is still a fantastic coach. He still knows how to deal with quarterbacks. Duke's going to have some issues replacing Daniel Jones, but I trust Cutcliffe to find a guy and to limit his mistakes early on. So I definitely think that game is a bit tricky. Then you play Virginia at home. I lean to Virginia. You have Perkins, who's back for Virginia. I think Virginia's a dark horse candidate to win their section of the ACC, and I definitely think that Virginia should be the favorite to win this game. I think North Carolina will struggle defensively to contain Perkins, as Perkins will run around and do whatever he wants. So lean to Virginia on that one. You play at Pittsburgh at night on a Thursday, which has already been announced for November 14th. Pittsburgh, are they a great team? No. However, they did make the ACC title game last year. Pickett is a question mark at quarterback, but overall it will be a night game on a weekday. I expect Pittsburgh's student body to be rocking there, and I will lean to Pittsburgh on that one. That than that, they play Mercer at home. They'll win that one because that's an FCS school. And then you play at North Carolina State in the regular season finale. I know that North Carolina State has to replace Ryan Finley, who was their star quarterback from last season. However, at the same point, I still think North Carolina State has a better overall roster than North Carolina, and the fact that this game will be in NC State, I think should definitely lead to an NC State victory. So based on that, I think they'll beat Georgia Tech. I think they'll beat Mercer, obviously, so that's 2 wins right there. I think that NC State is tricky because it's a rivalry game, but I think they'll lose that one. They could win it, though. And then Duke, maybe they'll win. And Appalachian State, maybe they'll win, which gives you a maximum of 4 wins. So I really don't see how this team's going to get to 5. And I think at minus 125 on the 5, you're looking at a push with a large probability of getting a win. So based on that, I like the under there at minus 125 at my bookie. And in terms of the actual, how much I would put on each of these props, I'll put 2.1 units to win a unit on Rice to go under the 2.5. On Texas, I will put I'll put whatever it takes to win a unit, as I definitely think that the plus 180 is worth it on the over 9.5. And I will also take 1.25 units to win a unit on North Carolina under 5. Those are by far my 2 favorite plays, the Rice under and the North Carolina under. But Texas has so much value, I think that is worth the stab. So the 3 win total futures that I like, once again, will be on Rice under 2.5, Texas over 9.5, and North Carolina under 5. I'll make another futures video in terms of conference predictions, and I'll try to go in on some of the conference titles, and I'll discuss those futures as well as potentially the Heisman Trophy. But this video is about 24 minutes. Sorry if it was a little bit long, but I tried to make it as thorough as possible to provide you with all the information that I have and why I like specific plays. But other than that, though, that's going to do it for this installment of the special edition, of Scott Selections. And good luck to all of you and your respective bets on this college football season. Bye, everyone.